said, I'm a visiting assistant professor. I'm in the Jobs College of Business, and I teach courses like Principles of Management. I teach international business, business strategy, research methods, I teach a lot of classes, and sustainable business practices. And I do research in cultural change, like how organizations use norms instead of formal policies to reshape and guide behavior. I also look at how we can use certifications, like I'm sure you've heard of a million different types of certifications. Energy Star, ISO 14001, B Corp. How can companies use those as tools to make change internally? And then social entrepreneurship, which is using a for-profit business model for nonprofit goals. Instead of relying on donors, you create your own revenue streams and theoretically a more sustainable source of revenue to achieve your goals. So those are the types of things I'm interested in and that we're increasingly seeing taught in business schools, which is really cool. So why business sustainability? We talk about sustainability broadly. We talk about it in a lot of different ways. Usually you hear like the triple bottom line or preserving, acting in a way today that preserves the earth for future generations. So what does business sustainability mean and why is that important? Well, we are seeing climate change at a global scale, and we're seeing evidence of that at global scales, but also at local scales, right? That volatility in weather that we're seeing, the disruption of local ecosystems. We're seeing it here in Bozeman. Anybody stick around this last summer? Yeah, we went and bought an air purifier and we're inside for most of the summer. The smoke was terrible. And we're projected to have increasing types of events like that. And so that's flooding from Hurricane Harvey in Texas on the top left. Just the rise in global temperatures. We're increasingly just seeing, above average. I mean, it's 48 degrees today outside in February. It's kind of insane. Carbon emissions and industrial production on the bottom left, and then that's increased hurricane activity on the right. My parents moved to Daytona Beach, Florida a little while ago, and so I'm hearing a lot more about hurricanes these days. And that's just not in my backyard, but it is in their backyard and a lot of people's backyards. So we're seeing increased hurricane activity, and we know that, corporations are some of the biggest contributors to this, to these effects. Biggest emitters, biggest users of raw materials, just in pure scope and scale. I became interested in this personally. How can we use psychology and sociology and apply that in an organizational setting to address people, planet, and prosperity, which is that triple bottom line idea, instead of just maximizing profits for a few individuals. So we have evidence. I don't know if anyone has seen this, of global temperature change. We call these wicked problems, these big like hurricane activity and, not sure what that is. Okay. Wicked problems are huge problems, like globally, global level problems that are complex, and that's why we call them wicked, because there's not just one simple solution that we can take. We can't just plant a bunch of trees and all of this will go away. We need complex solutions to complex problems. And we have evidence of this. So I think this is really interesting. NASA has been collecting data, or not NASA as we know it today, but there has been global temperature tracking since 1884, and they've mapped it. So I'm going to press play, and this is going to show us the global average temperatures, and the darker the red, the warmer it is. So I want you to look for, if you can see, it's a little bit small up there, what are some inflection points? Like when do you see the global temperature increase and sustain at that level? And think about what's going on in those years. the world warming? Seems like it. Did anyone notice any years where there seemed to be a shift toward warmer weather and it stayed warm? I don't know if you can see from back there. Yeah.
It seems it might be like me expecting to see change, but it seems like right around World War II there was an increase.
Yeah, like yeah, there's like a bump right around 1940, 50s, you know, kind of that time period. And then what's another, yes?
I think it's about, again, kind of the 1920s where you have like the Industrial Revolution and a shift towards like using coal and wood for heat and other things.
Yeah, we start to see more yellow all of a sudden in the 1920s, then we see another bump, we see some orange and red appear in the 40s and 50s, and then what's the big inflection point closer to now? The 80s. Yeah, so what? Industrial Revolution, that explains the 20s. What about World War II? What happened in World War II? Why would that cause global temperature? Just curious if anyone has.
Industry related to war.
Yep. Huge industrial production of heavy machinery, people flying all over the place for war. Yeah. The industrial food system as we know it today actually also arose in the 1950s. So like production on high volume and then shipping food everywhere. What happened in the 1980s? What 1980s to 90s? What's that?
The Reagan administration followed the Soviet Union.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
The Reagan administration followed the Soviet Union.
Maybe some more of the military stuff, potentially, yeah. I haven't thought of that actually. That could be true. Increased globalization in general, lots more air travel. What about the internet? Computing and the internet. So actually, we don't think about our little devices that we have, or this thing, producing much energy. In fact, these have become a lot more energy efficient in producing these. Companies are actually working on increasing the efficiency and environmental risk management of devices, but cloud computing and powering internet. So I think I have a statistic, so I'll get there next, but before I say too much more. So companies are contributing the most to this global climate change. And to me, that's why it's so important for me as a business professor to teach this in business school. It's not that companies are bad or making a profit is bad, it's doing it at the expense of people and nature. So some crazy statistics, this is from 2017. 100 companies have been responsible for about 71% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. The CDP is the Carbon Disclosure Project. A lot of companies voluntarily disclose their carbon emissions to this project. Say that they're producing 923 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalents between 1988 and 2016. So that's definitely why we see that bump. And then this is the statistic with cloud computing. Google estimates that data centers account for around 1% of the world's electricity use, and that Google itself consumes around 1% of that amount. So one company is contributing to 1% of the world's electricity use. This is from 2011. I still can't find an updated statistic, so I hope it's better, but I don't know. So a lot of companies are doing things towards sustainability, and that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about some of the companies, just a couple examples that companies that are really innovative and actually really pursuing business sustainability and setting really good examples, showing that it's possible, it's profitable, and that it's competitive, actually. So Google, Boeing, 3M, Amazon, Apple, Coca-Cola, Facebook, or now that's now Meta. I should probably change that icon. Forgot about that. They all, if you Google them, if you Google or search for any publicly traded company, they will likely have a sustainability report. And I encourage you all to look at those, particularly if you're a consumer, employee, or investor, and look at them with a critical eye. Look at, are these companies really doing as much as they can? And then think about how you can contribute to that, to them doing more. So just a question for you. What does sustainability mean to you? You can think about your personal life, your professional life. Any volunteers to share, you think? when you came into this talk, what did you think this was going to be on? Or more personally? Yeah.
I guess personally, I think of sustainability more as efficiency. Yeah, we can utilize our resources a lot better than currently.
Yeah, absolutely. More efficient use of natural resources is a really important thing for sustainability. And then I thought I saw somebody else, yeah.
Yeah, I just think of routine that I can maintain personally.
Yeah, so more efficient use of resources over time.
Yeah.
The over time part is actually a really big part of business sustainability. And we'll look at some examples, but instead of looking at that quarterly profit return, extending out your measure of performance over the longer term and thinking about, can this business sustain jobs for people? Can it sustain a sufficient profit over the long term, rather than continue looking at the short term, which leads to inefficient use of resources, really. So now we've moved in this direction in business from thinking actually about these as separate and balancing them. So we've moved away actually from that triple bottom line idea. From you have to balance financial value, you have to balance your profit with environmental and social concerns. Now we're saying, hey, wait a minute, actually, we exist on planet Earth. It's kind of a hard boundary, right? Like, you can't just walk off the boundary of the Earth and into space and find some other planet. Like, we have Earth, and that's it. And within that, we have society, and within society, we have businesses. So we need to start thinking about these as nested, and we have a model for that. So we have the Earth part we have. Has anybody heard of Planetary Boundaries before? I don't know if there are any natural. Planetary Boundaries is a really important framework. The Stockholm Resilience Center has come up with this, and it says, hey, we can actually think about Earth as 9 systems. And one of them is climate change, but others is like land use, fresh water, biodiversity, ozone, all of this stuff. And they interact. It's not like you can just, like as we're seeing, we've actually gone beyond what's healthy for biodiversity. That's what that red means. And we've gone beyond a couple of others as well. Climate change and nitrogen. And that has effects on everything else. You can understand, like, the warmer the climate gets, then, we have changes in land use. If forests are being cleared for agricultural purposes, that's going to affect water. That's going to affect biodiversity. All of these things interact. There's actually a really cool documentary, I just watched this last weekend, that the Resilience Center put out on Netflix. I think it's called Beyond Boundaries. It's very good. It's only an hour. Highly recommend it. And they really explain this framework. But this gives us okay, but science tells us that we know how the Earth works. Like, there are systems in place. They work according to natural laws. Like, this is how the Earth works. And that's actually really helpful to know that. And then we have social foundations as well. That society part. Has anyone heard of the UN Sustainable Development Goals? I'm seeing some nodding heads. Okay, more people. The United Nations got countries together with businesses and other stakeholders and said, you know what, there's 17 goals that we all need to pursue. And you'll notice that actually the first 12 are really socially based or commercially based. And then there's just a couple, like the Planetary Boundaries actually do a better job of 13, 14, 15. And 17 is actually collaboration. Like, we all need to work together toward this. So we also have a framework now of goals that we can work towards, which is social goals. So, we're having some help here. And then what I want to center on today is donut economics, which puts these two together in one and tells us, oh, this is how you have to think about living on Earth to operate sustainably. You have the planetary boundaries on the outside. We can't go beyond those, but we have to also think about social foundations. So those go on the inside. And so we want to operate in the donut, not outside the donut, not in the hole. And we need innovation for that. We need to think of how can we operate so that we're operating with Earth systems, not at the expense of, while also supporting people. Because we have needs. We need to have well-being. We need to be healthy. We need, equality, we need jobs, we need education, access to food. So this is hard. It creates a challenge, but anytime there's a challenge, there's opportunity. So this is how we're thinking about sustainability in business nowadays. And there's a great book on this. There are great TED Talks out there. Kate Raworth is the author of the book, and she gives some really great TED Talks if you're interested in learning more about this model. So it's a really useful model. You know, it's hard to see all the overshoots and how poorly we're doing. Certainly when you put it together and we see that we're falling short on actually the social foundations as well, it's pretty disheartening. But I think, you know, what I like to do and what I think is really important is we have so many tools already out there. It's a matter of us encouraging companies as consumers, working for companies and influencing them from the inside, and then being advocates with our local governments to make regulations that will help companies operate within that donut space. So we see a lot of these trends over time, and we call this the great acceleration or the great hockey stick. One thing I want to point out, basically you have the socioeconomic trends on the left, so with all that, you know, boom that we see in the 1950s on everything, that's great for us. More wealth, more jobs, more everything. We see everything, all the earth systems on the right also skyrocket. One thing, stratospheric ozone is kind of a cool example because we had problems, and I'm using the past tense. We had problems with ozone when I was young. That was the big news, the ozone holes. We recognized what needed to be done. We eliminated the products and the chemicals, and those ozone holes are repairing. So it shows that it's an example that if we can encourage companies to operate within that donut space and create ways to live without, you know, by working within Earth systems, we can actually let nature do its thing and just regulate itself, which is really cool. And really, for me, that gives me optimism. So let's talk about how to actually use the donut. And I'm curious, before we do that, can you think of any time or any company, you can think of yourself or like maybe you've seen a company that faced a trade-off, like do we uphold social foundations or do we protect the environment? Can you think of any examples or have you experienced that? I'm just curious. I can think of a bunch, but it's good on the business. Yeah.
I feel like if you want to get, like, say, sustainable housing to a large group of people, or not necessarily, just housing to a large group of people, and you can't, like, the best way to do it is to use, like, unsustainable resources or resources that could be an example.
Yeah. Yeah, you're trying to help people, you're trying to get them housing that's affordable, but you're trying to keep costs really low. So you use cheap materials that aren't necessarily recyclable or you know, good for the environment to produce. That's a great example. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe with like agriculture and producing like with cattle and beef, but it's also taking up a lot of land and water, natural resources.
Yeah. So that's to feed people.
To feed people,
right.
But it's also like hurting the environment.
Yeah. And we have actually lots of great researchers even here at MSU who are researching how to ranch and how to grow crops, but more sustainably, which is really cool. So there are a lot of tools. Yeah, industrial sized food production is not the best for the environment, for sure. Yeah, we can also think about, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, in Alaska, where I'm from, I'm sure there's someone from Alaska, like a lot of mining and oil companies will try and develop next to like rivers, which are really important for the indigenous populations who rely on those like, food sources. But they also provide a lot of jobs for people, and if you talk to anybody from there, most people are invested in the oil industry, and we're all guilty of it. That's how we all get around. How we use everything is from oil, but it's like also those very, very negative social and environmental and physical effects for the people that live there as well.
Yeah, that's a great example. All these are great examples of trade-offs. Because that's what it is. It's like, it's not like it's all bad. It's creating jobs. It's, but then there are these, like, how do you create win-wins? How do you create jobs and, prop up local communities while not displacing other people and not polluting the environment? Like, how do you do that? Yeah, so lots of examples we can think about. I would actually say most companies who produce a product face this trade-off every single day. They're balancing, trying to maximize reach to customers and sell to customers, and they're trying to keep costs low. And to do that, they're not as willing to invest in, let's say, greener technologies or selling less stuff or, whatever it takes, using higher quality materials, going back to the drawing board and designing products to be more sustainable from the get-go. I mean, all these take a longer term vision. If I look 20 years in the future, that's going to be a great investment now because I'm going to then have these sustainable for the next 20 years. A lot of companies are looking in the next year or two. So shifting that perspective is going to help companies understand that these trade-offs actually aren't so bad. They can actually achieve both. Has anyone heard of the circular economy? A couple people? Yeah. So this is how we implement the donut in practice, is we create a circular economy. And businesses are driving climate change and bad effects now, but they're also going to be the ones that drive a circular economy. If we can get people who know what this is and get them to work in these companies that produce big products at a large scale, we'll see a pretty big shift. So what it does is it takes the linear economy, you take resources, you make them, and then you dispose of them. What's missing there? Where do the resources come from? And where do they go? It's not like they disappear once you throw them in the trash. They're still here. It's just the companies aren't taking responsibility for them. So what we need to do is actually get companies to take responsibility for what we call the entire life cycle of a product. And that's what we're going to look at next. There's a couple of examples of companies that do take a circular look and do life cycle analyses. So that says, yes, we do have some raw materials that are new, but we're using them in ways that allow those new natural resources to regenerate or don't extract them beyond their regeneration rate. We can cut down trees, but we have to cut them down at a rate that still allows the trees to repopulate. That's the idea. Or we can fish and eat the fish, but we have to fish at a rate that allows the fish to repopulate. And then you just do everything you do. You manufacture, you distribute, you have consumers use them. And then the collection and sorting and recycling, we want as little as possible to have to go to the landfill. And there's lots of ways we can do that. We can design from the get-go to have products that you can take apart this desk in a way that we can separate the wood from the cloth, from the plastic, from the metal, and that all goes into the remanufacturing process of the same or different products. You can have things that are better quality, that'll last longer. Romney Hall is a great example of refurbishment or restoring. We didn't tear down Romney Hall and build a new building. We took, the bones of the building and added to it and updated it. So those are all ways to think about it. And then, of course, organic matter, you can compost and put back into the land. So lots of ways to do this. We also think of it as a life cycle. So, anyone heard of the company Patagonia? Anybody who's wearing Patagonia in the room right now? Couple people? All right. We're going to look at their circular strategy. They're really such a great example of a company working in a circular way really effectively and being quite profitable at it, actually. And they're influencing all of their competitors to do the same. Because now, we think about Patagonia, when you think of Patagonia, what do you think of? Sustainable.
Nice quality.
Nice quality. I think about, we'll talk about in a minute, they'll repair my stuff if it breaks. They'll, I'm going to spend $200 on whatever, but, that's going to last me a really long time. I think about their ethics. I think about their values. I want to support them as a consumer. So, yeah, they're really changing the game for other competitors, really. So they really can reduce, recycle, reuse, refuse. They also have food products. That's where that drop comes in. Is that you can actually, they're working on that. So they have a campaign called Warnware, where they say if it's broke, fix it. So like when I heard about that, my backpack's over there. I don't know if you've had problems with like zippers on backpacks or zippers on jackets. Like zippers are the bane of my existence. And they will repair it for you. You just send it in, they give you a new zipper, or they even have videos on their website that show you how to repair the zipper. And even beyond that, and they have a, the repair service that travels around. So I think it's been through Bozeman before in the last few years, pre-COVID. This van travels around to like different REIs or different, stations around the nation, and they just, they tell you they're going to be there. You bring whatever needs fixing, and they repair it for you. And so that's one prong of their strategy. Another prong of their strategy is just to please don't buy our stuff. They're actually marketing to please buy less stuff. And so they took out this full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal about 5 years ago that said, "Don't buy this jacket. Please buy less stuff." So how does a for-profit company do that? Like how do they stay afloat if they're telling people to buy less stuff and repair it? And actually part of Warnware is also used stuff. So you can go buy like otherwise pretty expensive stuff at a cheaper rate. They of course refurbish it, they clean it, How does a company stay afloat? So let's just watch, I want to show you just a brief clip. Oh, now it works. Okay, it wasn't working before. Brief clip, we're going to hear from Patagonia. This is the Chief Operating Officer. And he's going to explain how they actually make this strategy profitable. And so this also explains why other companies like North Face, Arc'teryx, a bunch of other companies feel that we have to do this because they're losing people. Patagonia, losing consumers.
Next, a look at a seemingly counterintuitive business model. Economics correspondent Paul Solomon goes inside an American clothing company that has been growing rapidly while marketing itself as an anti-growth business. It's part of our weekly series, Making Sense, which airs every Thursday on the NewsHour.
Are you guys sitting down? Because this is pretty horrifying. Okay, dog bite, shark attack.
Seamstress Kathy Avery couldn't care less.
When I get something like this, I do my best to make it kind of special, It doesn't look new, but so what? Okay, I don't look new anymore. It's okay.
Avery stitches for Patagonia, the outdoor clothing company, high-end enough to have earned the nickname Patagucci. Downstairs, the company's Reno, Nevada warehouse and distribution center sends its garments hither and yon to be worn by rock and mountain climbers, skiers and snowboarders, surfers, trail runners, or folks who just want to dress as if they do all that stuff. And each day, some of those clothes make their way back to Reno, to what's billed as the largest clothing rehab facility in North America.
They mess them up and we fix them up.
Behind me are 55 people extending the life of our product for our customers.
Doug Freeman is Patagonia's Chief Operating Officer.
We want our customers to invest in great product, and when it's worn out, we want to repair it for them.
It doesn't sound economical for the company.
I can understand why you'd say that, but the way we view it is that we want to reduce consumption.
That's what makes Patagonia so odd. A supposedly anti-consumption corporation. Since its founding in 1973, it's always had a so-called ironclad guarantee, including free repairs, but recently the company ramped up its promotion of that pledge with a cross-country worn-wear bus tour, biodiesel fueled of course, tailors reviving garments at stops along the way. And though it spends little on advertising, Patagonia donates more than twice as much to environmental causes.
We give away 1% of sales each year to grassroots environmental organizations around the world.
The company is always on message, as in a famous full-page New York Times ad, "Don't buy this jacket."
It seems oxymoronic.
It certainly does. In fact, sales are booming, up 25 to 30% a year since that ad ran. But we wanted to know, is this just a sales gimmick? So we went to the new Patagonia store in New York City's Soho district, which boasts its own repair center, and in keeping with the reduce, reuse, recycle, and consume.
We hope our existing customers do indeed buy less, but we hope to attract more customers that are interested in our message to build the best product, to reduce our impact and cause the least amount of environmental harm.
The way you could really reduce the company's footprint is by not selling any product at all.
Sure, but if we can show, the business community we're successful, we think we're holding ourselves as a great example for how business can be done differently.
So you're trying to knock off all the competitors out there who are making throwaway products, essentially.
That's right.
So
So that gives you an idea of this strategy. So I'm curious, do you think this has obviously been very successful for them in the short term? What do you think in the long term? Like 2030 rolls around, 2035. Do you think Patagonia is going to be profitable in the long term with this strategy? What do you think? Oh, just going to raise your hands, maybe. Yes? Okay, yeah. What about no? Okay, a few people. Anybody care to share what your thoughts? Yeah.
I think it's still going to be profitable just because it's what's already happening since they've aired that ad is you don't, you as an individual don't necessarily buy say 5 Patagonia t-shirts, you buy one instead and maybe repair another one that you already have. But then because they were able to do that, you're going to tell someone else who hasn't bought any Patagonia and they're going to buy at least one shirt and maybe eventually repair that shirt. And then that's going to spread around basically your word of mouth or that one advertising, because if you advertise less, if you make every single ad more dramatic or more appealing to the public, you're going to have just as much or more economic growth and support from your consumers. And that's just going to continue down generational lines.
Yeah, so people are going to need new stuff eventually, and maybe they're not Patagonia customers yet, maybe they are. And maybe they'll be drawn to this company because of the values. And they're the first mover on it, which makes us all, me certainly see them as more authentic about it. They really care, they're doing it first. I know North Face is advertising this too, but Patagonia seems more real about it. And then then I'm gonna tell you guys, and I'm gonna tell my parents, and I'm gonna tell my friends, and this ripple effect will probably start. If you're going to buy something, you might as well buy from a company that your values align with. Do you think this Recommerce, that's kind of their big brand on this, do you think it'll work for all companies? Let's say a computer company, or certainly probably not a food company, but maybe with packaging, a furniture company, do you think that this reuse, repair, buy less stuff would work for almost any company? Yeah?
I think it works great for industries and large corporations, because the issue is if you're switching out packaging for something biodegradable, it usually costs more, which even if it's 30 cents extra a package, that's a lot compared to someone who has a small business who's trying to achieve the same thing. So
scale is part of it. Larger companies might have a easier time of this. They have more resources, they have bigger scale, etc.
The thing that I have to think about is that Patagonia was already marketing towards a group that has the money to buy their products, and in more competitive fields where they're selling to more broad audience or lesser income people, they won't be able to jack up their prices and stay competitive.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But it's just something to consider.
Yeah, so maybe customer segment, Patagonia is certainly we think about as a differentiated, in business we call it differentiated, unique good. We might categorize it toward the luxury end. It's expensive. It's, I certainly certainly can't just go out and outfit myself in like decked out Patagonia gear. That would be way too expensive. Interestingly, the used goods line helps bring people in with lower incomes, which is interesting if you offer a used product line. And if you encourage people to understand that they're investing, like they're paying large, amounts right now, but it's going to last them a long time, that might also help. But yeah, on certain goods that are just meant to be like really hitting the price sensitive segment, it's going to be harder to do that for many reasons. But I don't know. I think that there's a lot of things that we buy used, like cars, bikes. We buy actually a lot of things used, and there's parts of this strategy or different ways of thinking about this strategy that companies could use. For instance, stainless steel is actually 100% recyclable, and it does not degrade. They just smelt it down, put it back in the process, make stainless steel products again. I found out that through a student project actually last semester that grill companies do not have any recycling processes. So I don't know, like when you return an iPhone or a computer, like oftentimes the company will have a buyback program, like send us your phone or your computer and we'll recycle it for you. Grills is just an interesting example because like so many people have grills and they tend to upgrade them, and the grills just go to the landfill. Like, why doesn't Weber or these other companies have like a drop your grill back where they're going to reclaim the stainless steel used and put that back into, little stuff like that. I think that there are so many opportunities for companies to be rethinking these things and making their processes more circular. And certainly consumer behavior will have to change as well. But it is interesting to think about how this would translate. The second example is a life cycle analysis in Levi's jeans. Anyone heard of Levi's? Anybody wearing Levi's? A few people. They're actually a great example of sustainable apparel as well. And I just thought I'd keep with the apparel theme here. There's actually a lot going on in the apparel industry for sustainability and circularity. So Levi's has this wonderful PDF file you can search for it online. And what I like is they give some pretty clear definitions. Life cycles map out all those stages of a product's life, including consumer use and disposal, which a lot of companies don't think a lot about. Like they just want to sell the product and get it out the door. They don't think about what happens when the consumer uses it or where it goes after the consumer's done with it. A life cycle analysis quantifies all of those impacts in terms of water and carbon emissions. And Levi's has done a fantastic job and a great example of this. So you can see that they loop this in with the cotton manufacturing, and they get really detailed about it. So you have all the raw materials listed there, intermediates to apparel, chemicals used and energy, and then packaging, use, and disposal. And cotton is actually, and what's cool about this is they map things in their direct control, which a lot of companies do. That's that linear cycle. Take, make, sell, basically. But a life cycle forces them to think about what's outside of their direct control and think about their product design for how consumers are actually using this and disposing of this product, which Patagonia is clearly doing. But I like this report because it shows you an example of what they're doing. So one pair of Levi's 501 jeans is equivalent to 33.4 kilograms of CO2 equivalents, which equates to 246 hours of TV on a big screen or 69 miles driven by the average US car. Water consumed to make one pair of jeans, use and disposal, so even the washing that we do as consumers, 3,700 liters of water. That's 3 days worth of one US household's total water needs. And now you start to, multiply that by how many pairs of jeans we have, how many people there are, how many times they wash them. And when they did this, they actually found that the biggest impacts in the life cycle of the jean were both outside of the direct control. It was the raw materials, the cotton cultivation, and the consumer care. So if Levi's really wanted to reduce the impact of their jeans, the product that they sell, they actually had to influence suppliers and consumers, which is another reason I love this example. So they did. They actually joined and started this Better Cotton Initiative program and certification to help improve the use of organic cotton. Fun fact about cotton, it is one of the most water-intensive crop on Earth. You need so much water to grow cotton. It's also one of the most pesticide-intensive crops. Very susceptible to insects, fungus, all that kind of stuff. So organic cotton, it's gonna, water is water, it's gonna use a lot of water, but it's gonna reduce the pesticide supply. And growing cotton in a more holistic way, I think somebody mentioned agriculture being, pretty environmentally impactful on the earth. So let's grow cotton in a way that actually works better with earth systems. And so they're working with that, and that's going to influence other companies. Better Cotton Initiative isn't just for Levi's, it's for other companies. And the competitive benefit that Levi's gets is that they're leading the charge. They're setting the standards, and they're the first out of the market, just like Patagonia. So now they have that edge. Other companies are going to follow along. They're going to say, oh no, now we have to keep up. But Levi's is ahead. So it works collectively and to Levi's advantages. So then Levi's also launched this customer campaign, customer education campaign, which I just find really funny. And I will note that Levi's also developed a waterless dye system, which is this tag on the left, heavy on style, light on water. If you buy Levi's jeans, look for that tag. I think it uses like a thimble full of water to make a pair of jeans now because it uses a carbon dioxide process to get the dye in. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know the details, but it's pretty cool. And then they did this consumer education effort to get people to wash their jeans less. So like cram like a college kid, load the laundry machine to capacity, and save up to 310 liters per month. Or, washing your Levi's jeans uses more than 21 liters of water. Dirty is the new clean. It's funny, actually, if you hang your jeans to air dry, it's actually better for them over time. They'll last a lot longer anyway. So they started educating people on that. So just kind of an example of a company finding out actually our manufacturing process isn't the biggest impact on the life cycle. It's people who buy our products. And how are we gonna influence that? Because we do want to reduce the impact. And the last thing I'll talk about, I do want to leave time for questions, so I'll just zoom through this and I'll actually skip through some slides. Has anyone heard of the VCOR Certification? Yeah, good. Okay, a couple people. This is a way to operate within the donut model for any business in any industry. It's a certification that certifies sustainable business models. So you could be a car manufacturer, you could be a services company, you could be a caterer, you could be a marketing consultant, you could be anything. And what it does is it certifies businesses that meet the highest standards of verified social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to make sure they're operating within that donut. You get recertified every couple of years. So you can actually go to their webpage. They have a directory of companies. You can look up, find companies. I think we have 6 or 7 here in Bozeman. They also, anyone interested, they have a jobs board as well. They have I forget exactly what they call it, Be Careers or something. So if you're interested in working for a company that has these values, then search for jobs or internships there. So B Corp is a really cool way for any company to do this. I'm doing research on that. I'll skip through that to just leave time for questions. So B Corp's another great way to operate within that donut. I'd love to just leave time for questions. So thank you. Any questions or comments on business sustainability? Yeah.
How can you differentiate between a business who's being sustainable for their marketing and their appearance versus actually being sustainable because they care?
Yeah, so there's I think an easier way for a large company. So if there's a large company that's publicly traded, they're going to usually have a sustainability report. Read it. like, look at what they're doing. Is what they're doing in that report easy stuff? Like, they're just like turning off light switches and reducing water. And it's like, but they're manufacturing phones or computers, and like some of the biggest impacts there, like think about what's appropriate to their business, is like the conditions that workers have to endure in extracting those minerals. And like, are they talking anything about that? You know, like, what are they addressing stuff that's core to the product, or are they just kind of loosely talking about, look at how great we are? So thinking about the actual like business of the company, and are they addressing that versus like, look at us shaking hands with people and like not polluting this water source over here, and you know.
So how can you, like, for consumers, like, you're looking for a more sustainable way to shop, say,
Yeah.
and then you see, like, you really have to do more research. So, like, how does, like, the average consumer become more sustainable? Like, they're just like seeing, like, oh, there's a sustainability report, they're chilling.
Yeah. So.
Oh, good on you.
I think it's called Good Guide. Actually, it's an app.
Yeah.
That I don't think every product out there is listed, but that's a pretty good resource. You can go on and search like, I think they get ratings like some number out of 10, and there's like maybe 5 dimensions that they're getting rated on. That's a pretty quick way. Go to their website, look what their values are. As a consumer, something like this, you can also think about like food-wise, buying more locally is better if you can. Buying less in general as a consumer is good. Identify a few companies that you know are sustainable and vote with your dollar toward them. You know, as employees, you'll get to know pretty quickly as an employee of a company. That's a different story. Even smaller companies, you can get to know if they're more sustainable or not, because you're in it. And ask questions, like just ask them. Yeah.
If I could just add on to that. The certified B companies have a little symbol on all their products, so if you just like look near, like anywhere on it, you should find like a little circle and a B inside of it, and that's a certified B like made product. And then also, like if you're gonna buy something online, there's often like a page that's really easy to just read through, and then also just like giving yourself a couple days before actually purchasing something, like I really want to buy this, and just wait, like think about it financially, think about like, do you really need it, how much you're going to be using it, and like things you already had that you like could use in place of that, basically.
That's a great piece of advice. Like just like, okay, I really want this, I'm gonna look at it, I'm gonna research it, but I'm gonna wait to buy it, and I'm gonna really think about, do I need it? Yeah, that's great. That'll reduce some consumerism, yeah. Buy used, that's also what comes to mind, actually.
Yeah, this year I've been trying to like buy used like sustainable stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like hard because like some sustainable companies have like somewhat expensive products, but like not too bad, but the quality doesn't always stand. So it's like finding this happy medium of like good quality products and a good company and like something that I actually need. But yeah, trying to like focus where I'm buying from and like what the quality is and how it's made. I don't do my purchases this year.
Yeah, it's true. It's harder. It's harder to buy that way. You have to do more thinking and more research. And actually, as you're talking about web pages, I thought about ThreadUp. Anyone heard of that? That's cool, and we're seeing more companies like this. They'll actually buy clothes from you that you don't want anymore. If it's acceptable and if they think it's available for resale, they'll then sell it. And it's all clean and refurbished and really good stuff. So that's a great place to look as well. Just as another company that comes to mind. Yeah.
So there's this concept, I'm sure that at least someone here's heard of, is greenwashing, where a lot of companies are basically just being like, being eco-friendly. One, like how big of a problem like do you think it is in like this new like eco-friendly company like revolution thing? And how exactly do you expect like, or not you specifically, but how does one like expect like the individual to be consciously making these changes when it's just these big sustainable companies just still polluting but blaming individuals?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways to do that. One is certifications is actually just in general. If they're certified, it means the company's paying money for other people to come in and look at their practices. So like not all certifications are made the same, but it's a good indicator at least that they're investing in it and actually like complying with some set of standards. So that's good. Indicates they're not greenwashing. Another thing to think about is like, what is the product? What is the industry? Like actually for my class, I was just looking for examples of like good and bad sustainability reports to teach. And I found there's also like ratings. So Sustainalytics is a company that rates companies on their sustainability. And I was surprised to see that PepsiCo is like number 5. It's really high up there. And I was surprised by that. It's a recent change. And then I saw like at the bottom of the list, it was like all oil, gas, like plastics companies. So I mean, it's like, well, that does not surprise me to me. But then I was like, okay, I went to Exxon's webpage and I looked up their sustainability report. Sure enough, they have a very nice looking sustainability report. It's very flashy. It has lots of colors and like the CEO is like all over the place, you know, and look at how good we're doing. It's like, yeah, I don't know. Like, you know, I don't really buy this. It's hard to, so I would say look at the product, look at the industry. Can the product ever really be sustainable? And if so, like look up some ratings, look at what they're doing. Look at if they're doing, you know, engaging in certifications. Certifications will indicate they're putting the money where their mouth is. Like they're paying for someone to come in. So that's a good indicator. Yeah. If they're saying they're super great and they're not really backing that up with anything, that's a pretty clear sign of greenwashing. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just like as an average person in a westernized country, in the world of consumerism, like what are the greatest contributors that we do to climate change? Like is it not eating plant-based or clothing or airplanes or like on a day-to-day basis? Like what are the top things?
Well, I have only a couple of minutes because I can talk about that for a while. We do have resources on campus, by the way. We actually have some people from the Office of Sustainability in the room who do a great job at figuring that stuff out, like for MSU students and our impact here. Commuting is a big one. Industrial food and food waste, actually. If you think about like buying only what you need with food and being conservative about what you buy, because again, thinking about the life cycle of food, like there's so much water that goes into producing that food, and then if the food is wasted, that's actually pretty big. So being careful about your food purchases, walking, riding your bike, carpooling, taking the bus, any way that you can reduce using your car all the time is pretty big. And then, I mean, airplane travel, yeah, that's going to be big. Any shout outs from, I don't want to call you all out back there, but we.
No, that was great. That's exactly what we were thinking.
We do, I should say, I'm on some committees here on campus with the Office of Sustainability working on getting educational events out. So actually we're going to have the Director of Sustainability for Bridger Bowl talk to us next month and talk about how we as a community can reduce emissions and still enjoy the skiing that we have, that we're so lucky to have right here. And we're going to keep working on that. We might, you know, we're going to have all sorts of things. We're going to have an annual sustainability summit in April that will talk about some of this stuff and announce our goals and how and actions that we can do to be better citizens. But yeah, commuting and that kind of stuff is probably the biggest contributor. But yeah, so look out for more sustainability stuff coming from MSU, and thank you so much. I think we're out of time. So thank you so much for your attendance and your participation. Thanks a lot.